What up, Squirtle Squad? It's man Chipz-N-Stix. I'm back with Squirtle. As you can see, this review is on Marvel's Avengers. I did not get a code from Square Enix, so I don't know I'm gonna tell you about the story, the gameplay, graphics and resolution, whatever you want to call it, and overall if it's worth your investment, because this is a games as a service game. And starting off with the story, it's basically about the Avengers holding a celebration for a new type of technology, and things go wrong. It seems as though the Avengers were set up because one, you gotta fight Taskmaster, and everything just kind of like goes wrong, right? The Golden Gate Bridge basically explodes. The Avengers are fighting, and a young girl named Kamala Khan starts her journey from being there at A-Day. And basically, she goes on this, this adventure to reunite the Avengers and I guess clear their name. That's basically the story without spoiling anything for you. And honestly, I like it because it's like it's coming straight out of a comic book. It's not like they're taking something directly from the movies, in the MCU universe, MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, whatever. Because this is its own thing, and I like it. If you're still reading the comics, you may actually like this too. I stopped reading the comics because, they were but either way, it's, if you are a fan of like the older version of the comics, reading stories like House of M or Road to Onslaught, things like that, then you're gonna love this. Even on a base model, this game looks pretty good. I have to say, I was overall impressed with, what they managed to do. Now, in the cities and like the science lab, scenarios, everything looks great. It looks polished, clean. It gives off that real futuristic kind of vibe. Even when you go into, the natural settings, right? Let's say, there's some missions where you have to go to, the desert or, a snowy kind of setting. It looks good, and it, especially in the desert, it pops. When you play missions in the forest area, while it may look nice and the colors pop, the green really looks green and looks good, it's also a little bit blurry. And this brings me back to Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because granted, Square Enix is behind this. Of course, they did Final Fantasy VII. Some parts of the garden area in that game weren't exactly as polished. And it kind of does the same thing in Avengers, where, some of the grassy areas, the fauna, or, some parts of the forest aren't exactly polished, and you can kind of see where they took a shortcut with that. Granted, they're putting a more of an emphasis on other things, like character model, and there's a good side and a bad side to that. With the character models, for the most part, overall, it's really good. Kamala looks great in her outfits. Iron Man looks magnificent in his outfits, his various suits of armor. It's, it really pops, and even some of them, has a real shine to it, that real metallic look. It almost looks real, and that's what I really like about it. But in terms of, the actual characters and how they look, another issue that I have is with it's small things, call it a pet peeve, but like their hair and facial hair, like, you see all of this, you know what I'm saying? It's a little too fuzzy for my liking. Now, I've only experienced this with one character, and that's Bruce Banner. In the beginning, when you play as Bruce, you see his hair, look a little pixelated, and even his facial hair doesn't really look polished. It almost looks like it's a glitch, and that looks bad. Because when you play as Tony or even Thor, they don't look like that. Tony, of course, all of the characters, their hair looks like it's supposed to have some sort of feathered texture to it, right? It I don't know, man. It just looks funny to me. But when you look at his facial hair, you know what I'm saying, all of this scruff, it looks clean. Thor, clean. And maybe that's a flaw in the character design. I don't know. But it doesn't take away from the overall aesthetics of the game and, how it looks. Even when you're in certain areas and let's say, certain parts of the environment are destructible, it's not mind-blowing, okay? Let's just say that right now. It's not mind-blowing at all. But it doesn't look too bad either. All right. So let's get down to the nooks and cranny of it all. Gameplay. This is very important because the gameplay goes into a bunch of things, right? It goes into combat, movement, everything, right? Now, I have to say this. Even when I played the beta, I had gotten very, 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 Destiny vibes. I don't even know why I said very. That shit didn't make sense. But I got Destiny vibes, right? If you've played Destiny 1 and 2, and you play this, it kind of like brings you back home, to Destiny. A lot of the structure is very similar. Let me tell you why. It's not with the combat, it's with how the game is set up. So, of course, this is an action-adventure RPG. When you fight, you level up, right? And you also have side missions, you have strikes, you're fighting the bad guys, you get experience, you obtain materials to level up your gear, you obtain new gear. Also, there's the scale in this one, basically the scale on how good the armor is. Now, Destiny, if I recall correctly, they had, it was color-coded. White, green, blue, purple, and I think that's it. But I think in this one, because I only have one piece that I can't even use yet, it has the same ones, right? With an additional level, and I think it's color-coded as yellow. I think that particular piece of armor is Pym technology, because you do come across Hank Pym in his game. There are different levels of armor, and you can level it up. You can, besides leveling up your character, you can level up the armor and boost the armor. You can break down armor to gain new materials and things to buy other armor. Very much like Destiny. The only thing that you can't do as of yet, and they may even include this, is you can't combine one piece of armor with another to make a bigger, better piece of armor. I'm hoping they do that because that is going to be sick. Especially since you can tailor the heroes to your playstyle. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Going on with similarities to Destiny, there are factions in this game. I think there's a shield faction where you can obtain, armor and stuff like that from shield. There's also the Inhumans faction, which you can obtain armor from them. And of course, every faction or every location where the factions are, you have vendors. In this one, it seems like you may have one or two vendors that are not necessarily associated with those factions. And I say that because, you come across vendors on, the shield carrier, the big ship or whatever, and you come across vendors, who don't have that faction title, like, on their name, which is cool. The other thing, too, is that, you can buy cosmetic items with, the in-game currency. I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. The other part of this game, in terms of, playing and leveling up, there are harm missions. Now, these missions are basically, how can I say this? If you've played X-Men Legends, you can go into, I think, what was it, Cerebro's training room and like level up your character. It's the same thing, right? And in this one, you can play different harm missions where it's just waves of enemies coming at you. Of course, you level up. You can also obtain gear from doing the harm missions, and you acquire skill points. So you can, if you want, you can totally just grind out, harm missions to get skill points to max out your character or to tailor your character however you want to play. Which is another thing. Every hero has certain abilities. And the cool thing about this is that there's a skill tree, right? Of course, just like Destiny had a skill tree, there are also sub trees or like sub levels to the skill tree. Basically, it's labeled as primary, hero, and ultimate. And primary is basically with all of your attacks, your specials. Hero is with other, let's say, abilities, right? And you can also change out your finishers. So think of Batman Arkham series, right? When you press two buttons together, he does a finisher. They have that in this game as well, but you could also change it out. You can, change out the finishers to what you want. But I think you only get a choice of 3. So, there's a limit, but at least, you have that privilege and that option to do it, which I think is a really good thing. You can also customize your hero to your playstyle, like I said earlier, and you can do that by either picking abilities and actions, or I guess moves, to make them either supportive, tanky, or just straight up assault. However you want, in terms of what their skill tree allows you to do, you can totally do it. And that option is just amazing, because I've never played any other game where you can do that. Of course, besides Destiny, where you pick, like 1 or 2 ways of building your character. Now, going back to the vendors in Marvel's Avengers, this one is different from Destiny because you can acquire in-game currency by completing things on the hero's challenge card. And the only thing that you can spend this money on is cosmetics. So even though there's microtransactions in this game, it's not, breaking your pocket. It's not pay to win, because you can only, and let me emphasize this, you can only buy cosmetics, skins, nameplates, and a bunch of other stuff, that does not affect how your character plays. Everything else, you have to earn it. Now let's talk about movement. In-game movement, character movement, camera angles. Let's get it all into that because it matters. Again, it's part of gameplay, so we have to cover all bases. The movement is not slow and janky, and it's not like super fast and uncontrollable. I feel like it's right in the middle, especially how different the characters move. It's pretty good. I like it. The only thing that I don't like about this is the camera angle. Sometimes, even when you lock onto an enemy, it'll kind of like go behind you, and it'll look like it'll just go into like a first person camera angle while you're fighting, and then you can't really see everything around you. Granted, you can lock onto your targets. You have to manually lock onto your targets, especially when they surround you. Otherwise, if you just start button mashing, your character may hit an enemy, or they may break something that's in the environment. The camera angles, even though when you adjust it in, the game settings, I feel it doesn't make a vast improvement, because I've tried it on a bunch of different settings and it just didn't matter to me. I felt like playing on the default settings were best. The only thing that I changed around was how fast the camera moves. And, the sensitivity. That's like every other game. It's normal. The other thing that I have to tell you guys about this, going back to combat. or at least the difficulty. I'm gonna talk about that. The difficulty is however you want it to be. You can do easy, normal, hard, and brutal. I'm playing on hard, and in some instances, it feels like it's brutal. Now, I recommend if you're just trying to play for the story, set certain parts to easy or normal just to get through it, because there are single player missions where you have to play as a certain character just to get through it, where they're not gonna be equipped. You can't really equip them with anything just yet, especially if you're getting around to unlocking that character, and it is going to be hell. Playing multiplayer is a blast. Now, shout out to my boys Gold Chain Gamer and Jedi, and even some of my brothers on the Chill Squad. You know, we've run some games, and let me just tell you, the more you play multiplayer games, because a lot of the game is actually multiplayer, especially when you unlock everybody and you can have a full strike team, it is fun. I mean, like, I can't get enough of it. It is amazing. Now, there are parts of the game where you have to play single player. Again, like I said, because when unlocking certain characters, you have to play their part of the overall story, which is good. I like it, because in those instances, the character is by themselves, so it doesn't make sense to have a full strike team with you. Overall, this is a wonderful experience that Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics has given us. This game has actually, in my opinion, got a hold of that winning formula that Destiny once had and failed at. Playing with people online is amazing. The multiplayer aspect is amazing. The story is great. It's like something out of a comic book. Basically, this is worth your money. Even at the baseline of $60, it's totally worth it. So if you've enjoyed this video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, come and join the Squirtle Squad. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.